For Elena Carter, climbing was more than a passion. It was her way of life. As a professional mountaineer, she had scaled peaks all over the world, seeking both adventure and solace in the mountains. But her latest expedition was supposed to be simple, a guided climb up Granite Ridge, a challenging but manageable peak in the Rockies. Her guide, Luke Barrett, was a local legend. Rugged and resourceful, he had spent years leading tourists and thrill-seekers through the treacherous trails he knew like the back of his hand. When Elena arrived, the two immediately clashed. Elena found Luke overly cautious, while Luke thought Elena was too reckless. "I've been up tougher peaks than this," Elena said, smirking as she adjusted her climbing gear. "And I've pulled overconfident climbers out of more trouble than I care to count," Luke replied, his tone calm but firm. Despite their differences, they set off with a small group of climbers, the crisp mountain air promising an unforgettable journey. By the third day, the climb had been uneventful until the weather turned. A sudden storm rolled in, bringing howling winds and blinding snow. Luke decided to call for a halt, setting up camp on a narrow ledge. But before the group could fully secure their gear, a deafening crack echoed through the air. The ledge beneath them began to crumble, sending half the group tumbling down the slope. Elena and Luke barely managed to hold on, their ropes anchoring them to the jagged cliffside. When the chaos settled, they realized they were stranded, separated from the rest of the group with no clear path down. "We have to get moving," Luke said, his voice tense. "This storm won't wait for us." Elena nodded, adrenaline masking her fear. "Lead the way." With visibility near zero and their supplies dwindling, Luke and Elena worked together to navigate the treacherous terrain. Luke's experience and steady demeanor kept them moving, while Elena's resilience and determination gave him hope. As they trudged through the storm, their conversations shifted from practical survival to personal confessions. "What made you start climbing?" Luke asked one night as they huddled together for warmth under a makeshift shelter. "My dad," Elena replied. "He used to take me on hikes when I was a kid, said the mountains were the only place he ever felt free." "What about you?" "Same, actually," Luke admitted. "My parents ran a camp up here. Lost them in an avalanche when I was 19. Elena's heart softened. "I'm sorry. It's why I do this," Luke said quietly. "To keep people safe. To make sure no one has to go through that." After days of grueling progress, the storm finally eased, but their troubles were far from over. A key piece of their climbing gear broke as they attempted to cross a particularly steep section, leaving them with no way to secure their descent. Luke insisted on going first to test the path, but the unstable rock gave way beneath him. He dangled precariously, his grip slipping. "Elena!" he shouted. Without hesitation, Elena anchored herself and pulled him up with all her strength, her muscles burning as adrenaline surged. When Luke was safe, he looked at her with a mix of awe and gratitude. "You just saved my life. You do the same for me," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the fear that lingered. As they caught their breath, Luke reached out and gently touched her face. "You're incredible, you know that?" Elena smiled, her heart pounding for reasons beyond the climb. "I've been told." The near-death experience deepened their bond. They continued their descent, relying on each other in ways neither had expected. Elena began to appreciate Luke's cautious approach, while Luke admired her fearlessness and quick thinking. When they finally spotted the base camp in the distance, relief washed over them. But with it came the realization that their time alone was ending. As they made their way to safety, Luke said, "You know, for someone who thought she didn't need a guide, you weren't so bad to climb with. And for someone who thought I was reckless, you're not so bad yourself," Elena replied, grinning. Back at the base camp, they were greeted with cheers from the rescue team and their group members who had been evacuated earlier. Elena and Luke gave their reports, but their thoughts were elsewhere, on the connection they had formed in the mountains. Before Elena left to return to her next expedition, Luke stopped her. "I've spent my whole life guiding people down mountains," he said. "But with you, it felt like I was finally climbing toward something." Elena laughed softly, her eyes shining. "Smooth line, Barrett." "I mean it," he said. "I don't want this to end here." "Neither do I," Elena admitted. They exchanged numbers and promised to keep in touch. Over the months that followed, they met for climbs all over the world, their partnership growing stronger with each adventure. Years later, on the summit of a breathtaking peak, Luke knelt in the snow, pulling out a small box. "Elena Carter," he said, his voice steady despite the altitude. "Will you climb every mountain with me for the rest of our lives?" Tears filled Elena's eyes as she smiled. "Only if you can keep up." Their laughter echoed across the peaks as they embraced. Their love forged in the trials of the climb, stronger than any storm.